pleasure to be here today. I had to do is pare down this presentation from its original from last fall at Layman Conference I had done for Dr. Maria Peters on mycoplasma eradication, elimination, and a systems approach to that. So why pursue mycoplasma negative status? Caden and Painter and others showed $63 to $10.40 economic impact of a mycoplasma positive pig, and that variance with various co-infections took that number from a livable number to a absolutely devastating number in the grow-finish phase. I did a presentation 3 years ago at Layman, and I was very conservative in my methodology, but 250 to 280 per pig, and dramatic impact with co-infections, lateral PRRS, lateral or flus in the population. So a wide range, and those combinations, the swine disease respiratory complex, taking that number that there's huge value, obviously, to getting a mycoplasma negative pig in our system. So our continuous improvement is always our goal. We have to be able to produce a robust pig at a competitive cost of production. We are a commodity producer. We sell pigs, and we have to be able to do that competitively. And the continued pressure to reduce antibiotic usage is another reason to pursue this. So another reason we began filtering our sow farms in 2009 and continued through 16. There we go. In my opinion, is and has been that we would have a better probability of remaining negative on the breeding herd level on a filtered sow farm in our world in the upper Midwest. The question always remains, and has been, do we truly eliminate this organism from the entire population, or do we only take it down to such a low level as to not be detectable in the sow herd or in that flow for some period of time? A couple cases here just recently, I could definitely speak on that, and I'll save that for later. So I had 4 areas in the systems approach. Number 1, to establish the goal to eliminate mycoplasma from the system. Number 2, to determine the status of each of these flows. Thirdly, to create this level of prioritization. If there's multiple farms, multiple breeding herds, in what order are we going to do these, and have a system to that. And then lastly, to establish the actual protocol, the detailed procedures of the closure, of the procedures with the start date, contingency plans, and then post-closure testing protocol. So first of all, to establish that goal to eliminate mycoplasma, it's very important to get the stakeholders on board, including the owners. There are risks to it. There's a cost to doing this. You can have the status quo, and they're not all going to be successful. Very important to get the farm manager and the production staff informed of why we're doing this. They're the ones taking on the extra tasks, the extra work. They're the ones doing that and carrying on these the vaccinations and the treatments. They're not seeing that benefit at their level in the sow farm. So it's important to communicate with that production staff. Next, to determine the status of these breeding herds. We've had a couple herds now we've taken on a number of years ago, and based on some limited serology and clinically negative. Now, after a couple of sow farm breaks, were they negative, or was this, again, that long-term, slow-moving organism? But in most cases, we know the clinical signs. We're able to say, yes, it's a positive flow. We need to fix this farm. Very important to know the source of the replacement stock. It wasn't that many years ago. Mycoplasma positive, you'd have to make a special notation on the genetic supply agreement that, yes, these are myco-negative pigs, and if they're not, that we can't put these into our farms. And so need to have a system in place to hopefully protect that farm in which the breeding stock's going into, and a means of quarantine isolation as much as you're able to do so with mycoplasma. So then it's prioritization, and how do we go about this? Number one, a number of times, and often, too often, unfortunately, the mycoplasma closure will be done in conjunction with the PRRS closure. So what it does is stretch out your time. If you're 210 days for PRRS, I want to be a minimum of 280 days for mycoplasma and ideally 300 or more. At times it coincided with filtration construction. The availability of an off-site alternative gilt developer to have your negative gilt supply in place and ready to bring into the farm upon reopening. It has to be in a biosecure location. We have to know, again, and as was mentioned twice before, this day zero, the zero date. It's highly critical. And compared to 6-8 years ago, we've become much more diligent in trying to determine that. Another possible factor is labor constraint. We may want to or have to do an off-site breeding project. Do we have the people in place and the location to do that? Historically, we've used two methods of elimination, the closure and the mass antibiotic treatment. And an alternative, I believe, we have never done so, but I think it has to be looked at, is depopulation, repopulation. With market conditions might present themselves that I could have a negative flow in about 5 months compared to a closure and up to a year before I could have that same negative flow, depending on the severity of that pig. And unfortunately, that's always easier to determine in hindsight, retrospectively, than going into in a break. So then the program itself, the procedures, that detailed plan that is put in place, and Dr. Yeske and his partner, Dr. Brad Lewerke, and others, it has the details of the start date, the closure date, when that exposure is complete, when the vaccination of the sow herd took place, the second vaccination, every detail, who's doing it, who's in charge, when we check off on doing that. And then our anticipated open date, and this was 286 days, and actually we got this one out to over 300 with an off-site breeding project. So the details of that are extremely important to work through and to take that time and the effort put in to not try to cut a corner to save some time. So just a brief recap of the projects themselves. So in 2011 we had 8 breeding herds. We're now 15. And 6 of those 8 were mycoplasma positive. In 2012, we undertook 3 programs, all in conjunction with PRRS closure and with filtering of those breeding herds. And 2014 had 2 elimination programs, independent of PRRS closure. And then 2017, just to give an example of some of the variation you can see in making it specific to each farm, a closure in which it was in conjunction with the PRRS closure and filtering and the construction of an on-site gilt developer unit, which allowed us to breed off-site. And of these projects, the one in 2012, again, we've become much more diligent in attempting to confirm that 100% exposure to the gilts, but the farm rebroke, and I know that at the time of the opening up, we had clinical signs, and we just didn't, we weren't diligent enough on that one, so that was not successful. All the others at this point appear to have been successful, and we're 6-7 years post-closure. So then sampling that downstream flow, we're kind of limited, as was mentioned twice. We do serology and late finishing and work aggressively on that. We have discontinued vaccination of the negative flows. And again, with Dr. Yeske's study, and I reference it here, that was presented, I think, 2 years ago, or year before last, was, yes, very, very low rate of what would appear to be lateral transmission of mycoplasma, even in very hog-dense regions in Iowa and southern Minnesota. I've been working with Dr. Peters and others, and what would be the processing fluid equivalent for mycoplasma detection on a sow farm, right? What could we do to find low-level infections in the breeding herds? So have no answer there, but just something that we're thinking on. So again, why pursue this? The impact has been documented. huge value to keeping that pig mycoplasma negative. Thank you very much. Thank you to all those who assist me on these projects, Dr. Yeski and two of his associates, and Dr. Maria Peters at the University of Minnesota.